South Lake Tahoe, California, June 10, 1991. A crisp, clear morning in the Sierra Nevada mountains. Pine trees are tall and green. The air smells of fresh wood and mountain lakes. It is the kind of place where families raise children in safety, where neighbors leave their doors unlocked, where the biggest concern is whether the ski season will be good. On this particular morning, an 11-year-old girl named J.C. Lee Dugard is walking to her school bus stop. She lives with her mother, Terry Probin, her younger sister, Shayna, and her stepfather, Carl Probin, in a modest home on a quiet street in the community of Mayors, just south of South Lake Tahoe. She is wearing a white top and purple pants. She has a backpack slung over her shoulder. She is excited about the last week of school before summer break. Her birthday is just 2 weeks away. She is thinking about what kind of cake she might have. She is just 1,500 feet from her home when a gunmetal grey sedan pulls up beside her. A man gets out. He is holding a stun gun. Before JC can scream, before she can run, he presses the device against her body and pulls the trigger. She collapses. The man drags her into the car. His wife is behind the wheel. They speed away. From his garage window, JC's stepfather, Carl Proton, watches the abduction unfold. He sees his stepdaughter being thrown into a car. He sprints to his bicycle and pedals furiously after the vehicle, but it is too fast. It disappears around a corner. He calls the police immediately. His voice is shaking. He gives them a description. Grey sedan, 2 occupants, 1 male, 1 female, a small girl being forced inside. Within hours, the FBI is involved. Search dogs are deployed. Aircraft scour the forests. Hundreds of law enforcement personnel fan out across the region. Roadblocks are set up. Every vehicle leaving the South Lake Tahoe area is stopped and searched, but the Garridos have already slipped through. They are on the highway heading west, a terrified child in the back seat. JC's mother, Terry, clutching her daughter's stuffed pink bunny rabbit, appears before television cameras and pleads for her safe return. Her voice cracks. Her eyes are swollen with tears. She begs whoever has taken her daughter to bring her back. She promises she will not press charges if they just let her go. The case is profiled in America's Most Wanted, generating hundreds of tips, but none of them lead anywhere. J.C. Dugard has vanished. The search will continue for 18 years, but she is not dead. She is not lost in the wilderness. She is 170 miles away, in the backyard of a convicted sex offender, in a hidden compound of sheds and tents. She is alive, and she is about to begin a nightmare that will last for nearly 2 decades. The man who snatched J.C. Dugard off that street was Philip Craig Garrido. He was 40 years old at the time of abduction. He was a convicted sex offender, but to understand how he came to be standing on that street corner in South Lake Tahoe, we have to go back to his earlier life. Philip Garrido was born in 1951. He grew up in a troubled household. His father was an alcoholic. His mother was emotionally distant. He developed an early fascination with pornography and sexual deviance. As a teenager, he began exposing himself to women. He was arrested multiple times for these offences, but each time he was released with a little consequence. In 1976, when he was 25 years old, Garrido committed a crime that would have kept most people behind bars for life. He kidnapped a woman in Reno, Nevada, and kept her in a storage unit he had converted into what he called a sex palace. He had painted the walls black, installed coloured stage lights, filled the space with sex toys, pornographic magazines, and bondage equipment. He also had a sawed-off shotgun. He raped the woman repeatedly and threatened to kill her. He was eventually arrested and convicted. But the American criminal justice system in the 1970s was more lenient than it is today. Garrido was sentenced to 50 years in federal prison, an effective life sentence. But under the federal parole system at the time, he was eligible for release after serving 1/3 of his sentence. He served only 11 years. He paroled in 1988. While serving time at Leavenworth Penitentiary, Garrido began corresponding with a woman named Nancy Bocanegra. She was a young woman from California who had seen his photo in a magazine and began writing to him. They exchanged letters for months. Nancy visited him in prison. They married in a ceremony held behind bars in 1981. Nancy was developed to Philip in a way that bordered on worship. She would do anything he asked. Her brother-in-law later described her as a robot. Neighbors called her standoffish and strange. After his release, Garrido settled with Nancy in Antioch, California, a commuter town east of San Francisco. He was required to register as a sex offender. He was also required to undergo regular check-ins with his parole officer, but the system was already failing. Garrido was supposed to be monitored closely. Instead, his parole officer visited his home infrequently and conducted only superficial checks. Garrido ran a small printing business from his home. He was known locally as Creepy Phil. He rambled about religion, claimed he could hear angels, and believed he had a telepathic hotline to God. He was a man whose grip on reality was tenuous at best. He once appeared at a local police station asking to speak with a detective about a religious mission. He was dismissed as a harmless eccentric, but beneath the religious delusions and the bizarre behavior lay a predator. Garrido had spent years planning his next abduction. He had built a hidden compound in his backyard, a maze of tents, sheds, and lean toss concealed by trampolines and fences. He had prepared a place where he could keep a victim indefinitely, invisible to the outside world. On June 10, 1991, he found his victim. He and Nancy drove to South Lake Tahoe, cruised the streets, and spotted J.C. Dugard walking alone. They had a stun gun. They had a plan, and within seconds they had a captive. When J.C. Dugard woke up, she was in a dark, unfamiliar place. She was disorientated, terrified, and in pain from the stun gun. She had no idea where she was or what had happened to her. She later described the feeling as waking up in a nightmare that never ended. She was in the Garrido's backyard compound in Antioch, a hidden world of tents and sheds, surrounded by high fences and covered with tarpaulins. She would spend the next 18 years there. Philip Garrido wasted no time in establishing his control. He renamed JC Alyssa. He told her that her family had abandoned her, that they had moved on, that they didn't want her back. He told her that if she tried to escape, she would be killed. He told her that the outside world was dangerous and that only he could protect her. He told her that her mother didn't love her anymore. He told her this so often, so forcefully, that she began to believe it. And then he began raping her. Garrido raped JC repeatedly, almost daily. He subjected her to every form of sexual abuse imaginable. He treated her, in her own words, like a human Barbie doll. She was a possession, an object to be used for his gratification. He would sometimes force Nancy to participate. He would sometimes film the abuse. He would sometimes force JC to write about it in a journal, describing in detail what he had done to her. He called this therapy. When JC was just 14 years old, she gave birth to her first child, a daughter fathered by Philip Garrido. She was a child herself, giving birth to a child in a tent. With no medical assistance, no pain relief, no support, Garrido refused to take her to a hospital. He delivered the baby himself. JC later wrote that she was terrified, that she thought she was going to die, that she prayed for her life to end because the pain was unbearable. But she survived. When she held her daughter for the first time, she felt something she hadn't felt in years: love and purpose. 3 years later, at age 17, she gave birth to a second daughter. Again, Garrido delivered the baby. Again, there was no medical care. Again, JC survived through sheer willpower. JC raised these children in captivity. They grew up knowing only the confines of the Garrido compound. They called Philip Garrido Dad. They called JC by her false name, Alyssa. They had never seen a doctor, never attended school, never played with other children. Their entire universe was the backyard at 1554 Walnut Avenue in Antioch. Life in the compound was a strange, twisted existence. The Garridos ran a small painting business from the property, and JC was forced to work. She did graphic design, typesetting and other printing tasks. She was sometimes allowed to interact with customers, who were introduced to Alyssa, the Garados' quiet, polite daughter. No one suspected that she was a kidnapped child. JC was also forced to maintain a journal. In it, she documented her deep depression, her loneliness, and her feelings of being unloved. She wondered constantly whether her family was still searching for her. She had no way of knowing that her mother had never given up hope, that her stepfather had spent 18 years haunted by the image of her being dragged into that car. Over time, JC developed a complex psychological relationship with her captors. She bonded with them as a survival mechanism. Psychologists would later describe this as Stockholm Syndrome, a condition in which captives come to feel dependent on and even affectionate toward their captors. It was not love, it was survival. JC's stepfather later said that her bonding with the Garados probably saved her life. But the bond was also a prison. JC did not try to escape, not because she didn't want to, but because she had been so thoroughly conditioned that she didn't know how. She had been told that her family didn't want her, she had been told that the outside world was hostile, she had been told that if she left she would be killed. And so she stayed for 18 years. The compound at 1554 Walnut Avenue was a bizarre and contradictory place. On the one hand, it was a prison. JC was not allowed to leave. She was not allowed to speak to anyone outside the family without permission. She was subjected to constant sexual abuse. She was forced to obey Philip Garados' every command. But on the other hand, there were moments of something resembling normalcy. The Garados celebrated holidays. They had Christmas dinners. They gave JC and her daughter small gifts. They took them on occasional outings, always with the strict understanding that they were not to speak to anyone, not to make eye contact, not to do anything that might draw attention. On these outings, JC and her daughters existed in a kind of parallel universe. They went to the beach, they went to amusement parks, they went to the movies, they even attended church services with the Garados. To the outside world, they appeared to be a perfectly normal family, a slightly odd religious family, but nothing more. JC later wrote that these outings were both a relief and a torture. A relief because she could see the sky, feel the sun, breathe fresh air. A torture because she was surrounded by people who had no idea she was a prisoner. She would look at other women on the street and think, "You are free, you can go home, you can see your family. I cannot." There were also moments of dark comedy. Philip Garrido was a man of many obsessions: religion, sex, printing, and bizarrely, music. He was convinced that he had a talent for songwriting. He would compose songs about angels and redemption and force JC and her daughters to sing them. He recorded these songs on a cheap cassette player. He would play them back over and over, convinced he was creating something profound. JC later said that listening to his music was one of the most painful parts of her captivity, not because of the abuse, but because it was so terrible. She also kept a diary, which she was allowed to write in but which Garrido often read. She used it as a lifeline, a way to document her inner life, a way to preserve her sanity. She wrote about her daughters, she wrote about her dreams, she wrote about the small moments of joy she found: a butterfly landing on her hand, a rainbow after a storm, the sound of her daughters laughing. She wrote about her mother. She wrote about the life she had lost. She wrote about the hope that somehow, someday, she would be found. On August 24, 2009, Philip Garrido did something that would finally unravel his carefully constructed world. He drove to the University of California, Berkeley, accompanied by two teenage girls, JC's daughters. Now aged 15 and 12, he was there to inquire about holding a religious event on campus. He was behaving strangely, rambling, agitated, incoherent. He told the campus event manager that he had a spiritual voice that he needed to share. A UC Berkeley special events manager named Lisa Campbell became suspicious. She asked another officer to conduct a background check on Garrido. What they discovered was alarming. Garrido was a registered sex offender on parole for kidnapping and rape. He had been convicted in 1976 for a horrific crime, and he was now wandering around the university campus with two teenage girls. Campbell called Garrido's parole officer, Edward Santos Jr. Santos was surprised to learn that Garrido had children. He ordered Garrido to bring the girls to a parole office in Concord, California on August 26. On the morning of August 26, Garrido arrived at the parole office. He was accompanied by his wife Nancy, the two teenage girls, and a woman who appeared to be in her late 20s. Garrido insisted that the woman and the girls were relatives. The woman identified herself as Alyssa, but something was wrong. The parole officers could see it in the woman's eyes. She was terrified. She was shaking. She was trying to hide something. The officers separated Garrido from the group. They began questioning him. Under pressure, Garrido broke down. He confessed to kidnapping an 11-year-old girl in 1991. Then the woman, Alyssa, spoke. She said in a voice barely above a whisper, "I am J.C. Duggar." The parole officer stared at her in disbelief. J.C. Duggar had been missing for 18 years. She was presumed dead by many, and here she was standing in front of them, alive. The officers immediately arrested Philip and Nancy Garrido. They contacted J.C.'s mother, Terry Progan. Terry was told that her daughter had been found alive. She later described the moment as the best day of my life. She was at work when she got the call. She collapsed to her knees. She wept with joy. She drove to the police station, not knowing what she would find. That evening, J.C. was reunited with her mother. Her first words were, "Hi Mum, I have babies." The news of J.C. Duggar's rescue sent shockwaves around the world. After 18 years of captivity, she had been found alive. She was 29 years old. She had two daughters. She had been held in a backyard compound just miles from the San Francisco Bay Area. The Garridos' house on Walnut Avenue in Antioch was searched by the police. They found the hidden compound, the tents, the sheds, the lean-tos, the makeshift living quarters. They found evidence of the years of abuse. It was a squalid, cramped, and degrading existence. They found the journals J.C. had been forced to write. They found the cassette tapes of Garridos' terrible music. They found the stun gun he had used to abduct her. J.C. and her daughters were placed in a secure, undisclosed location. They were given medical care, psychological support, and time to adjust to a world that had changed dramatically in 18 years. J.C. had missed the rise of the internet, the explosion of mobile phones, the end of the Cold War. She had missed her entire adolescence. She had missed her 20s, but she was determined not to let her captivity define her. On April 28, 2011, Philip and Nancy Garrido pleaded guilty to kidnapping and rape. They faced 29 felony counts, including kidnapping, sexual assault, false imprisonment, lewd conduct with a minor, and child pornography. In a dramatic courtroom scene, Philip Garrido stood before the judge and said, "I am guilty. I am responsible for all of it." He did not apologize. He did not express remorse. He simply accepted the verdict. Nancy Garrido also pleaded guilty. Her role in the abduction was less clear. She had driven the getaway car. She had helped keep J.C. captive. She had participated in the abuse, but she had also been a victim of Philip's control. She had been brainwashed, manipulated, and conditioned to obey him. The court acknowledged this, but still held her accountable. Philip Garrido was sentenced to 431 years to life in prison. Nancy Garrido was sentenced to 36 years to life. The judge told Philip Garrido that he was a monster who had stolen the childhood of an innocent girl. Garrido showed no remorse. J.C. Duggar did not attend the sentencing. She had already begun the long, difficult process of rebuilding her life. In the years after her rescue, J.C. Duggar did something extraordinary. She refused to be a victim. In July 2011, she published her memoir, A Stolen Life. In it, she told the story of her 18 years of captivity in her own words, without a ghostwriter. She wrote about the abuse, the isolation, and the psychological conditioning. But she also wrote about her survival, the mental strategies she used to cope, the love she felt for her daughters, and the hope that kept her alive. The book became an instant #1 New York Times bestseller. It was praised for its raw honesty and its refusal to sensationalize. JC narrated the audiobook herself. Her voice, calm and steady, was a testament to her resilience. In 2016, she published a second book, Freedom, My Book of Firsts. It chronicled her life after captivity. The first time she rode a horse, the first time she flew a plane, the first time she went to a supermarket. It was a celebration of small victories, of reclaiming a life that had been stolen. JC also founded the JC Foundation, which provides support and services for families recovering from abduction and the aftermath of trauma. She has become an advocate for missing children, using her story to raise awareness about the dangers of abduction and the importance of never giving up hope. In a 2016 interview, she said, "I have lived a lot of lifetimes. I have been through things that no one should ever have to go through. But I'm still here. I'm still standing, and I'm not going to let what happened to me define who I am." She has also spoken about the importance of therapy and mental health support. She has said that her recovery was not immediate, that she struggled with anxiety, depression and PTSD for years after her rescue. But she had found healing through writing, through advocacy, and through the love of her daughters. She has also worked to rebuild her relationship with her mother, Terry. They are now close. They speak regularly. They have gone on holidays together. Terry has said that she is incredibly proud of her daughter and that she has learned from JC what it means to be strong. The JC Duggar case is one of the most extraordinary abduction stories in American history. It is a story of unimaginable horror. An 11-year-old girl snatched off the street, held captive for 18 years, raped repeatedly, and forced to bear 2 children to her abuser. But it is also a story of resilience. JC Duggar survived 18 years in captivity. She survived the abuse, the isolation, the psychological conditioning. She survived because she never gave up hope, even when hope seemed impossible. The case also exposed profound failures in the criminal justice system. Philip Garrido was a convicted sex offender who should have been in prison for decades. He was released on parole after serving just 11 years of a 50-year sentence. He was able to abduct JC because the system had failed to keep him behind bars. Moreover, the parole system in California was woefully inadequate. Garrido had been under the supervision of the California Department of Corrections for years. His parole officers had visited his home but had never inspected the backyard, never noticed the hidden compound, never questioned the presence of a young woman and 2 children living in his home. They had failed to do their jobs, and as a result, JC Duggar had been held captive for 18 years. The state of California later settled a lawsuit with JC for $20 million. It was a recognition of the state's failure to protect her, a failure that had cost her 18 years of her life. The state also introduced new legislation to improve the supervision of sex offenders and to require parole officers to conduct more thorough home inspections. But the case also had a broader cultural impact. It forced Americans to confront the reality of long-term abduction. It showed that victims could survive years of captivity and still rebuild their lives. It challenged the narrative that missing children were either dead or beyond help. It gave hope to other families who were still searching for their loved ones. JC Duggar and her daughters have built a new life together. They live in relative privacy, away from the media spotlight. JC has said that she does not think of herself as a victim. She thinks of herself as a survivor. In the opening of a memoir, she wrote, and I quote, "In the summer of 1991, I was a normal kid. I did normal things. I had friends and a mother who loved me. I was just like you, until the day my life was stolen. My name is JC Lee Duggar. I don't think of myself as a victim. I survived." I unquote. She also wrote, and I quote, "I have learned that no matter what happens to you in life, you can get through it. You can survive. You can even thrive. It takes time. It takes patience. It takes a lot of work. But it is possible." I unquote. This is the legacy of JC Duggar. Not a story of what was taken from her, but a story of what she reclaimed. She was stolen at 11, held for 18 years, and subjected to horrors that most of us cannot even fathom. And yet she walked out of that backyard compound and built a life on her own terms. She survived, she thrived, and she refused to be silenced. Her story is a testament to the strength of the human spirit. It is a reminder that even in the darkest of circumstances, hope can endure. And it is a challenge to all of us to never give up on those who are still waiting to be found.